Well, did we have, I mean, if you went back to the first sheet, or the second page, actually, of the 5 principles.
Right.
So you just heard the 5 principles now. Did any of those get, are part of the result? So was it a fair selection process? Was there, or is there timely information for parents, etc.?
That's a good point.
Oh.
Probably the first one. It sounds like overall the lottery formula and the way it was set up, for the most part, has been consistent. Now, people may have disagreements with, you know, whether we need to change the formula, but I would say that the lottery process functioned the way, you know, I mean, it didn't result in civil unrest or anything.
Let's say the lottery process was implemented, then whoever's talking can talk about that a little bit, to say how good, bad, or indifferent.
Okay. So what would be a bullet point, brief way of saying that?
I would just say the lottery process was implemented.
Lottery, okay, great. I think I would want to put the 50% up higher, you know, because that's a really important. That's a really important one.
Right under the lottery process was implemented.
I think so.
Yeah. Now, when it was started, how many registration centers were there? 3?
There were, so we could say they started.
Okay.
Started with registration centers. But then they were cut.
Say original registration centers were cut?
Yeah, where registration centers.
They went from 3 to 1?
Yeah, were started but went from 3 to 1. Started, but
So from
3 to 1. Trying to keep short. Okay.
I mean, the other way to say that is the registration was centralized.
Okay, so registration started as 3, but then was centralized.
Yeah, centralized to 3.
But then centralized, and then we can unpack that a little bit later. Then centralized. That's good.
I'm sorry, registration was centralized?
Yeah.
Period?
Started as 3, then was centralized. Because we might want to go back to suggesting we go, you know.
But before that, everybody registered at the local school, or what was the situation?
Yeah, I mean, you had a house in the neighborhood, and you went to the school in your neighborhood, and you approached the office and registered. As far as I know, I mean, you always had to register for school. You know, Kathy was just here. We might have asked her, but that might be a question. Let's collect some questions for Kathy too. What was original process of registration
before this?
Before choice. Choice. Okay. Citywides. I understand that there always were citywides. Do you remember back?
I don't recall that. Well, my familiarity with it was with elementary was during the late 70s, early 80s. But it was, you know, the busing that I ran into was going to the MAP program, and also my son went to 19. I guess you could say, but well, there was some form of choice then because we put him in 19 because we wanted an all-day kindergarten for him, and you could I think at that point you could ask to have your kids bused if it was going to improve the racial makeup of the schools rather than hurt it.
Okay.
But
All right.
he went there because of all-day kindergarten.
Okay. Citywides. Maybe there's no other way to say it. Citywides have variable source. It's not balanced registration. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anything else?
I guess the issue was at the end that a lot of people got pushed around to whatever school happened to be open.
Available
Yeah.
proceeding.
Yeah.
Right, so I guess the question is, you know, I think the idea, maybe the way you set it up is to talk about, sort of in short form some of the issues and then get into more details
Okay.
about, I mean, we could get into full detail on this page, but like
think
when we
if-
say 50% of families, that's when you could say, well, and so then the other 50% got placed, or we could talk about it here too.
Yeah, and we, in the meeting, 2 meetings ago when I was there, and we went through this just point by point and made all the notes, and we were purposely leaving out some of the history, just not to get too bogged down in detail of the history, because
People tune out.
People, I think if they haven't been using the system as it is, what's the point really in teaching them a whole lot about it right now, because they already aren't using it.
Right.
And then they may get confused between the history and what we're trying to propose new. Could just get all jumbled in their minds. So
Yeah.
I think purposely we were leaving the history pretty brief.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the history of what happened is probably the more important part of it, so that they know what it is we're trying to improve on.
Okay.
Conceivably, improving on it would be to make what was intended work the way it was intended.
And
but
it may be that the bulk of what we're recommending is just making sure that we get rid of stuff that's clearly impossible to do.
but I
Making
think-
sure we're
I
really
think,
hitting
you know,
the stuff that we do find is
The
important.
1.5 mile
Highlight.
thing is the thing that really screwed up the choice thing, because if you're trying to put your kids on a bus,
That's another question. So what was the original, and how / when did that mileage change, or did it?
it
did
didn't
used
as
to
far as I
be-
know.
There's a friend of mine who's like 10 years younger than me who lived in Rochester, and he was, the 1.5 miles was in effect then.
Mhm.
Back. Do you know when?
Well, he's in his 50s.
Okay. So I heard, and we need to clarify this, I heard that there was kind of a de facto, like, for elementary school kids, especially when it got dark, that they were making exceptions,
He might have
that.
made some, but I know, like,
but it's not across the board,
yeah,
so that's it.
Dan Ross's son, Michael,
Mhm.
walked probably 1.5 miles to school 16.
Yeah.
Pretty close.
So we need to find out about that, the exceptions.
I thought of this busing issue. We're driving through Montana, Wyoming. It's like you see one house here, 10 miles later, you see another
Right.
house. And it's school bus stop, school bus stop. So
Yeah, right. Busing.
I'd almost have this one as state funding limits the busing to 1.5 miles.
Oh, state funding, okay.
Mhm.
State funding. Limited. Busing. Okay. And services like special ed and ELL need thoughtful distribution. Yeah, not sure that was really completely thought out. Like, we're supposed to have services in each of the zones so that students could attend. Oh, did we put the thing about zones in? Was that not important? Maybe not.
We chose to leave
The zones
I
out.
think.
Okay. Okay.
And by distribution, you mean which schools are there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a choice of, and of course it's connected with finances. Do you have all special ed services in every building, or do you have select buildings? And if you have select, you probably need it somewhat of a combination, but if you have, they're probably designated buildings, and maybe the citywides that have a broader range of services. And it should be available at least in every zone, so that if there's a special ed student, if it's not in their closest school, at least in the citywide in their zone, they could be more likely to access that instead of having to be bused across the city. So I want to double check. That's another question for Kathy. We may have discussed this already, but I just need to double check as we're getting close to like putting it out to the public. I want to double check that we're saying the right thing. Special ed and ELL distribution.
What does ELL stand for? I didn't know.
Early language learners. Yeah, I guess maybe we should get away from the
It's
lingo.
early. I always thought it was English language.
Sorry, English language learners. You're right. It has a lot of different names sometimes.
ELS.
What are some of the?
ESOL.
Yeah,
SL.
SL. There's at least 3 or 4 acronyms for it. So.
Does this really say what we wanted to say? I'm thinking availability of services need thoughtful distribution.
Yes.
Maybe it's okay with this.
I think you're right. Availability. Or access. So, availability.
Which do you want me to use?
Access. Because it's a shorter word. Fewer syllables.
Access to services like
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Goals for new managed choice. Okay. So I think my main suggestion for that page would just be the order in which we list these. And then we'll get to more specifics of how we would. I mean, like, well, so let's have a discussion about whether we're going to get into the weeds about, are we going to, yeah, here's the tricky thing. Do we get into the weeds about the 60% or the 0.5 or adjusting that or the catchment area, those things? What are the specifics that we're going to suggest? Because I think everybody would say, oh yeah, we want more parent participation. We want to double check that people like.
Could we save money? Could we, maybe we write it as a, could we aim, could,
maybe just a parentheses question mark after classroom.
yeah. Could we free up more money for the classroom with less busing? In this case, I would just turn around, could we, so it's a thought,
Yeah.
prompt. Could we free up money for the classroom with less busing across the city?
And you probably don't need the across the city. Just less busing.
Yeah. Or, well, long distance busing, right?
Yeah.
Well, you could talk to
Because we're hoping for shorter
It's
distance
reduced
busing.
distance, for sure, right? So that's you reducing the busing if you do it for marginally more kids. But I can't imagine any elementary school has more than 20% of the kids that are walkers,
Yeah.
given the distribution of,
Everything we've seen.
yeah.
But I think really hitting home that point about how truly many kids are being bused across the city is a
Maybe
huge
we need
point.
another graph, another page showing. I mean, this
Well,
this does it.
That does illustrate it, but I think sort of hammering that home won't hurt, because if
Mhm.
parents aren't truly aware of
How scattered it is.
in how many kids it affects.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, yeah, they may know their kid goes across the city and they're okay with that, but if you stop and think about how many thousands of kids this is affecting, that's a
Mhm.
huge problem.
Mhm.
You know, it's a huge,
Yeah, that graphic gives pretty good indication of that, though, I think, because there's so many dots.
well, I know, but I'm just saying, in my mind, reinforcing that point won't be a bad thing.
Okay.
But
Connecting the dots, like saying, we want more families choosing their neighborhood school because, you know, it helps strengthen communities. When
Mhm.
people choose their own neighborhood, it cuts down on the long distance transportation. Not going to maybe cut down on the short distance, but cut down on the long distance. It would contribute to more family engagement, I think.
Yeah.
So those are 3 points. Building community, cut down long distance transportation, and enhance parent engagement is the connected dot to that second bullet.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking on the parental participation in the school of their choice. So you combine the two thoughts of you actually get to choose the neighborhood school, and once you're there, you choose to be more involved in it.
So which bullet are you?
The second one. No, the first one, sorry. So more parental participation in the school of their choice.
Although where we're headed here is, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking about, we're not probably going to get rid of choice entirely because parents like that,
Mhm.
because it's sort of like
Mhm.
it's already out, the cat's already out of the bag, but we want to sort of encourage people to choose the ones that are closer. So we
Right.
want to incentivize, and in order to do that, we want to simplify the process.
Mhm.
And if we went back to catchment areas or emphasize the catchment areas again, that's a way of saying, hey, you already live in this area. This would be your homeschool automatically, and you don't have to go through the lottery.
Mhm.
You know, life is easier if you just pick your homeschool.
Mhm.
And we really publicize that information. People could still have choice, but if we incentivize it by making it easier, maybe we would get higher participation,
Mhm.
you know?
and I think the original point of that bullet was, yes, we do want the parents participating at their child's school, but I think this bullet was more, we want them participating in choosing the school
Mhm.
because only 50% right now participate in the lottery. I think that was the original point of that bullet.
In saying, including, this is my homeschool, or, you mean, when the word choice to me always implies,
Somewhere else.
somewhere else, right? Maybe that's the wrong image of it. That's what it kind of says in my, that's what I think. Instead of, it's sort of like there's a dichotomy, there's homeschool, and then there's choice, which is anywhere but homeschool,
In-
right? Or do other people not think of it that way?
No, I agree.
Yeah. One thing, in here, do we capture the fact that the choice program was supposed to incentivize the schools that weren't getting chosen much to improve, but that never happened, you know, because the ones that weren't being chosen probably end up with the least involved parents and communities, and so it just didn't really have that effect, whereas what we're hoping for is with
Yeah.
more.
It's the ongoing evaluation / improvement to the process.
Mhm.
Actually, there should be a / improvement in there too. Right?
Okay.
So let's go back to the language here. And
Wait, show me what you want in that first.
and that was the very first, under history, the last bullet, ongoing evaluation / improvement. So we don't want to just say, yeah, the problem's bad, we want to do something about the problem. Like, okay, school number X not
Mhm.
getting chosen. What can we do in the way of resources to make it a more attractive school? You know, we need to put more resources there.
Mhm.
So the concept of equitable funding, not equal funding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's look at this language again, school choice. So more parent participation.
Well, maybe the bullet below
Oh, yeah,
really
maybe.
goes more to what I was just saying was the original point of the first bullet.
Yeah.
More families choosing their neighborhood school, that's what we want, hopefully, but then including John's point about, and then they're participating more in that school that they do choose.
Yeah, so actually there's 2 points, well, yeah, so it's 2 points. And we want more families choosing their neighborhood school, higher district-wide, this is happening on a more district-wide, maybe that's the same thing.
Now,
More families choosing their neighborhood school, and which leads to higher participation in the school itself.
Yeah.
So you want to change more to higher before parent? Higher parent participation in the school of their choice?
Maybe we
Greater.
lose this first bullet and just start with the second one. More families choosing their neighborhood schools, and which leads to higher participation. I don't want to make it too wordy, but
Yeah, you don't want to, you need to keep these bullets fairly
okay.
short.
So maybe
So I
that's
think just change the order. So more families choosing their neighborhood school would be one,
Mhm.
and then number 2 would be more
parent participation in their school.
greater parent participation in the school of their
So just
choice.
maybe lose the word choice in the school, just participation in the school.
mhm.
In their
Right.
school.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me want to add another bullet. More neighborhood cohesion, right? Because that's what also what
Yeah.
happens just on a broader level beyond that.
Well, doesn't
That's
the
sort
last
of the
bullet
last bullet,
sort
sort of
of-
says-
Oh, yeah, you're right. Here it is.
So do we want the busing bullet to be number 3 still?
Yeah, so we have number 1, more families choosing their neighborhood. 2, more parent participation in their school. 3,
Could we free up money for the classroom with less long distance busing?
work toward, how about work toward?
Toward freeing up?
Redirecting money
About-
from busing toward the
How
classroom.
about reduced busing costs,
Yeah,
redirected to classroom?
reduce and redirect busing costs toward the classroom.
Because the busing may actually go up a bit in that you're having a lot of short distance busing, but
But the
it's
costs.
got to be less expensive, you know.
Yeah.
So say that again for me. Reduce.
Reduce and
Reduce
redirect.
busing cost. Frees money for the classroom.
And then my question to Kathy and Heather is, would short distance busing result?
Yeah,
And-
it's,
Reduce
More
and
money.
redirect busing costs, freeing up.
Or
Then we
back
get back to
toward-
that question, is that true, which we started off questioning.
yeah. And I-
Aim to? So we're not promising? Aim to?
What's the goal?
The goal.
This is the
It's a
goal,
goal,
right?
yeah.
So the goal is that happens.
The goal is-
You meet all
The
your
goal
goals, not
to
necessarily.
free up
Mhm.
money for the classroom.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to have things morph into is you may increase busing to very short distances, but then that lets walking school buses thrive. It once kids get used to
Right.
their
And
streets.
And my sense is that if there were more families going to their neighborhood schools, and even if we started out with a lot more short distance busing, the neighbors would get to know each other, and then that would lead to more walkers,
Mhm.
which would eventually lead to less busing. I would think so. I mean, I'm going to speak at
Mhm.
School 12 today, and we made our lifelong friends through the process of walking our kids to school.
Yeah.
It's been 20 years of friendship because of all the walking we did together.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, and that doesn't happen when you
They're all
don't.
on different buses.
Yeah. So I think it would lead, ideally, in that direction. With your rising here. Okay.
The other thing we never looked at was, for short distance busing, is the busing cheaper or crossing guards cheaper and more effective? So Ralph used to talk about the crossing guards, or his communication to the neighborhood, which is fairly effective, at least in his stories. And is that a thing that you could replicate somewhere else? So instead of busing kids within half a mile, you'd put in 20 crossing guards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good
It's
question.
not necessarily on here, but to
Yeah.
think about it when you go back some other
And
time.
creative solutions. Yeah.
Yeah, the answer is probably going to vary from neighborhood to neighborhood, depending on what the drug problem is on certain streets. You look at some of these police videos that are surfacing, going viral, this, that, and the other thing happening. Some streets, it isn't so much getting across the street that you don't want your kids to see. It's some of the drug activity going on. So in some places, short distance busing would definitely make more sense, and in other areas it's primarily a matter of parents just not being used to their streets and being more afraid than is warranted.
And it may be that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Maybe you could do more crossing guards in some areas and less busing,
Right.
and then other areas more busing and less crossing
Mhm.
guards, because people just aren't using it. So an analysis of likely guards versus buses
Mhm.
in different neighborhoods, right?
Yeah, what brought to mind when we were doing the petition for getting GAN to move the legislation.
Mm-hmm.
One of the people I got to sign it said, "Oh, I'm waiting for 16 to come back. I want to be a crossing guard." Okay. So he's responsible for that idea.
Okay. So then maybe the neighborhood is number 4, right? The neighborhood becomes the community,
Mm-hmm.
the school at the hub. That's where we're headed. And then,
And that's sort of the same as the one that was before.
this one is the school allies with the neighborhood associations. Just unpack that a little bit. How does the policy do that? I know that's a personal aim. I want the school board to be connecting with the city neighborhoods and working in much more tighter alliance, but I'm not. Am I forgetting something? How does the policy do that?
Well, it's certainly, it's something that we've been pushing, trying to get some of the schools in the 19th Ward to see themselves as it being to their advantage to really be part of the association, have teachers join the association, be on mailing lists for things that the association does, so that there's more of talking back and forth.
And I can tell you from public library perspective that we've had variable success in partnering with the schools that are nearest to, a particular branch, as far as partnering on getting the kids their library cards and having the classrooms come and do visits to the public library and learn about the public library. And so, I think some schools are very in tune with that whole idea and working with us, and others aren't very much. And so that's a real lost opportunity right there for community building and community networking and
Absolutely.
all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, do the changes we're proposing in the policy lead to that?
Well, if you've got more,
I don't think they lead to it, but I think the last bullet, if we want the school to be at the hub of the community, then I think the school does have to ally with its
Mhm.
neighbors, surrounding organizations. Otherwise, I don't think it works.
Right.
yeah, 1 year.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with this. I absolutely believe that's
Right.
what we
Mhm.
need to be doing. I'm just not sure that this pertains to the choice policy, unless you think it does directly. I mean, we can say.
Well, again, I think I pulled it kind of right directly off of here. So.
Okay.
But I think it's once families choose, if they choose a neighborhood school and you get people from the neighborhood in there, that naturally leads to that.
Mm-hmm.
You think so? So you
Yeah.
think there is a direct connection?
Although you'll have neighborhood organizations that have multiple schools underneath them.
Yeah.
So 4 of them in the 19th Ward, for example,
Mhm.
going to 3, but
3
at
and
least 4 for now.
4 for now. We'll win that fight too. One thing that I should point out, Jenifer was at the meeting last night. We had the Southwest Common Council Education Committee. We ended up with 3 teachers and the principal from 16 coming. Partly, I think one of the things that stimulated it was at the Building Advisory Committee last week, I think it was. I brought up the question of should we be looking at getting a rec center into the school at 16, because there was some talk of possibly switching the cafeteria and the gym around, and if we put the gym in the northernmost part of the school, now that makes it very easy to have it be part of a rec center. If you build a few things like an office and maybe a small conference room or something on the next to the gym. And my hope, the reason that came to mind at that meeting was, gee, if we can get the city to foot the bill for the rec center, we might reduce the costs that we've got to cover and have room for getting air conditioning and stuff like that in the school. And there was a lot of talk back and forth. On one hand, they're afraid that, gee, if we draw more money into the building a rec center, if it all comes under the $29.4 million we've got to renovate the school, we don't want it to suck away from the other basic things that we need to do. But that goes right in, and we got to get a hold of Ralph and get him involved in a little bit of this thinking, because he went through it once successfully. Now a lot of it was his doing very extraordinary work at 17, but I think in all of this that we're talking about, there's a need, that we're assuming will be satisfied, of improving the culturing of principals to work towards community schools that have more parental involvement. And
Right. I mean, it's like I totally agree with all of that, and we need the better leadership, and we need the alignment with the city. I'm just trying to be clear about true statements we're making about the policy. So I'm thinking, here's some language. How about, again, it's a goal, or it's a proposed, increased neighborhood school selection will help align schools with neighborhood associations, rec centers, libraries, and city services. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's too wordy.
Okay, right. So if you can wordsmith it, right, that's the idea. But increasing,
Right. So
or more neighborhood school selection will help align, will help the alignment with
Community group.
community groups, yeah, and city services.
Mhm.
Maybe that's the easier way to say it. I'm always wordy at first. I need wordsmith. So that could be
neighborhood school selection will help align.
will align schools, better align schools with community organizations and city services, something like that. And that could be the last bullet, because in that way we go from the family to the neighborhood to the city. It's sort of like a growing circle.
So that
Number
statement
5.
replaces number 4 completely?
Yeah, I think so. It's the same idea, just slightly worded differently.
And then you want that new phrasing, the 5th bullet.
Yes. So these are what we're hoping for,
Mhm.
but we haven't gotten to the specific. We want people to we want to make sure people buy in to these goals, because this is the heart of our goals in changing the policy. And maybe we don't need to get into details of how we would do that, or maybe we do.
Now, the objective of this was to kind of prep parents that we're getting into groups to get answers out of, so that they have some common background as to what the objective was, how it worked, and what we might need to do to ease here.
Better late than never.
Hey,
maybe.
for sure. I think we were trying to make sure they have at least a minimum understanding of what the issues are, because some of the people walking into these focus groups may not know there's any problem. They've always
Right. This is the rationale.
Worked
This is
for
the
me.
heart of
worked for me, or my kids
Right.
got assigned somewhere, and as long as I get them on a school bus, I'm happy,
Yeah.
and they don't know what they're missing.
Yeah, I mean, most people are just thinking about their own kids. They're not
Mhm.
thinking about the system. The policy has to think about the system, so we
Yeah.
got to get them to think a little bit beyond their own child and think about what this policy has done to neighborhoods, to the city, and think bigger, and what's the rationale behind changing it. And so this is the main thing. Like, if they agree with this, or if they do, we want to make sure that they're on board with us having more families choose their neighborhood schools. Because if they disagree with that, then, where are we?
This doesn't say anything about citywide draw.
That's true. It was mentioned a little bit earlier about the variable. We would keep, so we would keep the citywides, but maybe reduce their number, or just make sure there was one in each zone, right?
So there's potentially a citywide to a zone-wide school. So instead of having one citywide draw, you'd have 3 zone draws. Or something.
Wouldn't all the schools be zone draws?
I don't know. I
Yes, oh, yes,
missed
yeah.
a couple of weeks.
You're talking about citywide, it's not,
Yeah, citywides, yeah.
yeah, just the citywide.
But there's nothing about it. I think that's what
That's true, we haven't mentioned.
all that set of people will say.
Yeah,
So what
people might
about-
ask about that, for
Yeah.
sure. Anybody who's ever known.
Would right now, in terms of the current citywide, because I think it's helpful to say right now we're really talking about 58 and 10
Uh-huh.
that has a citywide programmatic draw
An element.
with academic versus, I certainly understand why there'd be schools with special services
Mhm.
for maybe multiple handicapped children, but if number 10 and 58 are currently in our minds as citywides
Mhm.
because they're both EL schools.
Do we have any, we don't have an EL up north, do we?
Can we do talk under the recommendations slide? The first one is
Oh,
revisit
okay.
citywides special ed and ELL for balanced recruitment and services. I don't know if we need to
Oh, yeah,
mention
is
it
in there.
earlier than that.
Okay.
Because if there was a third EL school designated, you could eliminate the citywide issue
Mm-hmm.
by saying every zone has an equivalent EL
Yeah.
choice.
So maybe that's one of our goals, is every zone have an EL. 2 out of the 3 have it right now. So we want to make sure there's an
And
EL
is that fair and equitable?
to have an EL in each zone.
Right, because I mean, the current problem or the current state is 10 and 58. Everybody has access to
Mhm.
a lottery for those 2 schools.
Yeah. as
They have
long-
availability to the lottery if they get the paperwork in on time.
But they're
the
supposed to
sibling
just
preference
be.
would take that away.
Yeah. But they're.
Once they expanded to 12,
They still have sibling preference exists with citywides.
I know.
Yeah, so I mean that's
But there's enough siblings at 58, since it
Mm.
goes K through 12, that there may not be any slots left for non.
kids in that zone.
Yeah.
But this right, so then right, you have to weigh. No system's gonna be perfect. So maybe
Right.
so maybe having one in each zone wouldn't, because of the issue you bring up. Maybe that is a bad suggestion.
But the goal is somehow to maintain magnet schools, for lack of a different term.
Yeah, we're not proposing getting rid of citywides.
Right.
But we want to make sure there's a citywide in each zone, right? Is
I'm
there some
saying,
Right.
what would be the
advantage?
could I, as a parent, live in the south zone? Let's say, can I, as a parent, if there's an EL school in each zone, can I apply to all 3 citywide schools?
Well, that's a thing for question. I mean, I think ideally the purpose of having one in each zone is that you just go to the citywide in your zone. So
But then I think you have to drop the name citywide.
oh, you're right.
Like that's
Zone-wide.
zone-wide.
Zone-wide, called zone-wide. But we
And-
have to make sure there is a zone, one in each.
And I think
Yeah.
we also have to keep in mind that whatever we're going to do here is going to be a morphing from what we have to what will be.
We hope
So, the citywides will just start accepting pre-K kids and kindergarten kids from the zone,
As we move
and
forward.
it builds out.
Yeah. So the question is, are all kids right now? I'm like, if I live in the south, could I, or let's see, if I live in the north, can I attend 10? Or can I put my name in the lottery for 10? I think you can, but maybe
You
we
can
shouldn't be
right
doing
now,
that.
yeah.
You can?
Well, I don't know. Well, it's a citywide,
So the citywides are not limited by zones right now.
right?
Okay, so that
So-
might be something we're recommending.
So
to do.
when the new policy
That pulls
goes
us closer
in,
into our
then that
areas.
would pull us into the zone recruitment for new students.
I think we probably don't need to try and figure that out for this focus
Mhm.
group, right? 'Cause
Right.
We're saying we're gonna revisit this whole thing, and I think maybe based on some of what we hear in these focus groups, we may get parents who feel strongly about, I want to maintain the citywides, and we'll hear that, and
But it's so hard to propose something in the future if you don't have an example in front of people. Like, so if, for instance, there's not a citywide in the north, and so right now parents in the north are trying to get into 58 or 10. So if they don't have a school to think about, they're obviously not going to be for, right? I mean, until we say we want to establish an EL
Mhm.
zone-wide in the north, then they'd like, oh yeah, we'd have it, we already have it, maybe. We'd be okay with that, but without that existing right now, I'm predicting that parents in the north would just feel like we're cutting off their options to get into the other zones.
Whatever the goal is, something like create equal opportunities
Create
for
equal
citywide.
opportunities.
Yeah.
So maybe that's, yeah. Because right now, you're just supposed to, I guess they're open to everybody, and they're supposed to be sort of equal enrollment in each of them.
I think you could.
May or may not be happening. And we're proposing perhaps moving from every citywide should have equal representation from each of the zones, moving from that to, we want to establish, make sure we establish a school, a zone-wide
Mhm.
in the north, which doesn't have one currently.
So I'm looking at the 4 questions up there in the frame there.
Yeah.
What is the outcome we want? Do we want more schools like 58 or fewer? Or are we happy with the number of EL schools? Do we think that the parents would want more or fewer? Like,
Well, how many people choose them? I mean, that's a question for Kathy. How
Maybe
many-
that's a question. Do we want more?
That's what I was gonna
Well,
say.
how many-
I
how
think
many-
we need to ask the parents these questions.
Well, how many people choose it and don't get it? So how many sign up on their choice for I want 58 or I want 10 and they don't get them?
right.
So if it's a big number, then you've got a big demand, pent-up demand that you can't service. If it's 1 or 2, then we don't really have enough people applying for that you could actually set up a third school.
So what's the question for Kathy then?
How many
How many are turned down?
are turned down for 58 and 10?
Yeah, I think right now, performance-wise, 10 is having some issues, and I don't know how well publicized that is, but you know, some of the, certainly that last article that was beating on the board for not studying the charter schools and how well they're doing mentions that 10 had terrible results, whereas the charter schools had great results. And you know, the question is going to be how many people are going to be applying to that if they read that article, applying to 10 if they read that article, and building a new expeditionary learning program in the Northeast, in the Northwest, I should say, is not something you do overnight. It takes a
Right.
lot of training of teachers and getting people to understand that it's there. And it'll take a while for it to really be functional.
And I think that's an important piece of the fact that we're going to try and reach out to parents. It's almost as though if we're going to propose something, whatever that something is, okay, it could be the status quo. If we keep it the way it is, we can say these are how the schools are performing, and this is how they've been performing for 15 years, and this is how the lottery works. And we could be, the goal could be to inform the public
Better.
more fully about why it matters to participate in the placement process. If we say our goal is to create a district that in 5 years looks like this, you'd have to own, you know, the data says this, and we think by having an additional 1 or 4 additional ELs, so there's EL schools, 2 in every zone, however we want to compose it. I think right now there are winners and losers. The winners are the ones that go to 58 school. Like, that's just the impression that you get from parents, is that if your kid got into 58 school, you won. Well, then that means that A, kids whose parents don't participate don't even get a chance to play the game, and then there's losers. So I think we need to sell the public, not so much that any system is going to be perfect, but we either need to sell them that here's the current system and we're going to go with it, or here's the new system and here's what we hope it looks like. And I think that, so what, you know, where are we staking our flag? Because I'm not sure as though.
I know we haven't really clarified our recommendation with that. I mean, clearly there's some good stuff that was meant to happen when the policy was written,
Yeah.
like the parent centers in each of the zones, like you know, monitoring and improving schools, like if they were falling behind. That should have been happening, right? So there's no change proposed for those sorts of things. However, things like change the 0.5 or the 60% and simplifying the system and
you know, what are the little tweaks are, what are the main tweaks
Mhm.
that we want to propose, and what do we want to propose? I'm not sure we are, because if we don't propose it, then the policy committee will just propose something. So we want to probably make an argument one way or the other. Do we want another citywide in the North Zone, because there clearly is not access up there? Do we want to continue to allow all students access to all the citywide so that we are busing anywhere? Or do we want to sort of limit it down once we have a zone-wide up in the north, then say, no, it should just be within zone? Because it might be that that's the main thing we're saying here, is like, wow, there's a huge inequity in the north. We definitely need a good school in the north that people want to choose and are excited about signing up for. And that would take care of a lot of the lack of participation. Maybe that's one of our biggest findings or recommendations here.
Yeah, and the question is, what site would you pick, and did we already close it and sell it?
Charlotte.
Charlotte is certainly one that we still have our hands on. The only
Well, 42 would be the.
42.
You could do as the EL for the elementary EL.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless you went K-12, but that'd be. I don't know. Charlotte's facilities will.
10 is not K-12, so.
Right.
So yeah, 42 maybe.
42.
Maybe it's an argument to do for. It's
No,
just
that's
south
what-
of Charlotte. It's very
Okay.
close.
Definitely in the north. Yeah.
Definitely
But
the north.
that's going away from a community school.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so far away.
It is isolated. It's not-
Everybody-
Well, if it's a city, it's a zone-wide draw, then you'd like to pick one that isn't going to be like 10 right now. We really need it as a community school, because if you look at the distribution of kids and you say, okay, we want to have neighborhood schools that every kid can be part of in that neighborhood, they've lumped the catchment area from 10 and 16 together. They comes to 1,000 children, you know, and 16 maybe can hold 500. So, you know, and then there's the whole confusion of what does the Wilson Foundation Academy, you know, that's another one that's kind of citywide draw.
So we're really mostly talking about elementary, though,
Yeah,
pretty much.
but it goes from elementary through junior high, right?
Yeah, I think so. To 6th grade, maybe, or maybe it's a little bit higher, 7th grade. And I'm looking at the time, and I'm going to have to leave. It doesn't mean you guys couldn't keep talking, so and maybe you should. I like the changes that we've done so far. What about, do we want to end with questions rather than recommendations? I mean, these are clear. Reestablish parent information centers, return to assigned default school according to catchment area. That's not an instead of choice. It's in addition to choice. To clarify that.
Sorry, what?
I'm sorry. What page are we on? We are.
The recommendations had reestablished parent information centers.
Mhm.
That's what we
The
should-
second one, return to assigned default school according to catchment area.
Do you want me to change?
The way we've worded it here is it makes it sound like we're going back to the policy before managed choice appeared. We want to make sure it's kind of, we're not getting rid of managed choice. We want to hit some sweet spot where we are saying we want to simplify the system so everybody knows what their default school is and they can more easily participate in the sign up. They don't have to worry that they're going to get placed across the city or in some bad school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not getting rid of choice. It's establishing a clear default in addition to
I want to
choice.
say
Right?
encourage default school according to catchment area.
How would you establish?
Establish. Yeah.
you know, so that
Established default.
if I'm a person who just moves into the city and I've lived anywhere else, I come in and I say,
Where do
I have no idea about any of these schools. Where does my kid go?
And you say, oh, that's easy. Here.
See the one closest to you? That's your school. I think most people would react favorably to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And the third one is just don't move everybody around.
Yeah, this is all,
Yeah,
this would
yeah.
start at some
Yeah.
point with the newest families.
Mhm.
We're not going to throw everybody out of their current schools.
One of the things that we've talked about in the other meetings is that, just as a recommendation, the selection deadline is very early in the calendar year. And I wonder if families even care whether the deadline was pushed back to May. But as far as participation in all this,
That's a question for Kathy. What would the impact of moving the deadline have on the placement office, right? Because there has to be.
well, the bigger impact would be the default catchment area schools. I mean, that would also need it. It would be interesting to get her point of view on that.
Say that again.
If the default is a catchment area, because right now there's tremendous flexibility in placement because half the kids they can put them wherever they want because they don't participate in the lottery. So wherever there's an open school, you may live near number 42, but if
If it's full.
10 school has an opening, you're going to 10, even though you're somewhere else.
So it's really kind of like limiting placements, not power, but like they're wide open.
Their flexibility
Their
limits their flexibility.
Default, yeah. So limiting flexibility.
Give them a dartboard with my face on it. And
Yes. Default is the catchment school. Right, and then, yeah. Yeah. But that would really have to be coupled with that improvement committee that says, okay, you know, these kids who are going, their default school is this neighborhood that has a school that's poorly selected. People have a bad impression of it, whether it's true or not. But we need to do something actively about improving this school, whether it's through resources or something shiny and new. I don't know. So I'm wondering if we need this page: reduce bullying, sleep loss. I like children's friends live in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all good. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave pretty soon. But so here's this question: How specific are we going to get with change the 0.5? What are we going to say we're changing it to? Longer? Maybe we get rid of the 0.5.
What's the 0.5?
The guaranteed attendance at the neighborhood school.
But it's not
If
even
you're-
guaranteed, right?
No, it is.
Guaranteed up to 60%.
Guaranteed.
As long as
if you
you are-
do it early enough.
As long as you submit by the
Early enough.
deadline.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the only people that, as I would say, get to choose their school because everybody else goes into a lottery.
Yeah.
If the catchment area becomes the default,
Mm-hmm.
then the half mile, that number, that distance becomes
Moot.
moot.
Yeah.
Okay, so we change the to catchment
If you're in the
area.
catchment area, you can choose that school up to the point that the lottery.
I mean, you still have to have a
Take
deadline,
place.
and there
You still
still
have a deadline,
is,
yep.
and
Yeah.
there still is an order of, because you know, let's say the school runs out of seats. You know, and even if you are in that neighborhood, sorry, the school is full. So there is
Right.
an incentive to still get your
To
kid.
participate in the policy.
So did we just change that bullet language? And what is it if we did?
Actually, we didn't. I was just talking to myself, writing all over
Okay.
this place. So we would propose changing the 0.5 back to the catchment area,
Yeah.
and maybe increasing the 60%, right?
Yeah.
Because
Sure, I'm not
that's
sure why
just
you
a
need a
cycle.
cap.
Yeah.
Oh,
'Cause-
100%?
You know what
Because
I mean?
that's a psychological thing. If people say 60%, that's not good enough, I'm just going to leave the district and go, right? I think there's a sense that the odds aren't high enough at 60%. If it was more like 90%, if you do it in time, or even 100% if you do it in time.
It seems like a solution in search of a problem.
But you can guarantee your spot by going early.
Yeah.
If you call Kathy in December and say, I'm ready to register my kid for next year, and you do it, I'm sure you get it.
So just get rid of that. If
No,
you do it
only if you're
early
a half
enough.
mile. If you call Kathy, she can only guarantee it if it's a half mile.
Yeah, well, we're saying if
Well,
we,
we do the
but now we're going
Oh,
to,
if you do, okay, yeah.
we have to get them to
Yeah.
give us a catchment map,
Right,
which,
yeah.
you know, we're working without
So
here.
it has to be if early enough. See, that incentivizes
Mhm.
people to
That's right.
participate. But we get rid of the 60%. Maybe? Is that what we're saying?
Well, and just to kind of flip it on our logic here. Ralph Spezio and talking about a school in a neighborhood that has higher concentration of poverty. Are we going to say that if every family in that neighborhood wants to go to that school, we're only going to? Because I think we're always looking at it as how are we going to
Say yes to everybody?
say yes to everybody. But if you want to go to your neighborhood school, why should we be saying no? So eliminating the 60%. If there's a school in a zone that has capacity for 800 and there's 800 in the neighborhood and 800 people, families, get their paperwork in on time, shouldn't we say yes to every family that wants to go to the neighborhood school?
We should. We should.
So
and
we do.
should
So we
make
would
it
have to
not a
eliminate the
scary
60%
thing.
then.
I think so. I think we say, but it has to be, but for placement's sake, it has to be by a certain.
By a
And
deadline,
there's
yes,
a-
definitely. There has to be, because you can't.
And there is an order. I mean, if the seats do
transportation,
fill up,
right.
if there are 900 kids instead of 800 kids, 800 seats, the later ones may have to get, into the next catchment area.
But you're going to assign catchment area by number of kids.
Ah,
That's where that really becomes an intriguing
That becomes really
pickle.
tough.
so that changes then, according to population, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's some fluctuation.
the catchment area for if we had every school, if we say every school needs to have the ability to be a neighborhood school, and school one, which has hardly any kids in that catchment area, you say, well,
Attending.
you grow the catchment area to get enough kids to fill that school.
That would require constant analysis
Yeah.
Yeah.
of the population.
Mhm.
So maybe that's a recommendation. We need to do constant analysis.
And that's reaching.
To redistribute the catchment area. And
Mhm.
people won't like that in operations, but if we have a good data system, why not, right?
And if you publicize it around the school neighborhood, if there is a policy, and I think it's important to weigh, like a school that's in a high poverty zone, I'm going to use Ralph's narrative, and then number one school, which is certainly not in a high poverty zone, right? And Ralph was really championing a neighborhood school for his zone. And if you went to number one school area and said, here's the district policy. If you are in this neighborhood, this will be your school. Look across the street. Wave to your neighbor. Hi, neighbor. They're going to send their kids to the same school as you.
Mhm.
If that guarantee is publicized, I suspect more families in school one who are beyond half mile might choose it, because if I'm a parent and I live 0.6 miles from school one,
Yeah.
and I'm told you need your
60%.
application by February, and then there's going to be a lottery. Your kid may go to one, or your
You
kid
just
may
say
have to go
whatever
to.
about it,
You
right?
just say, yeah, I have the
Yeah.
wherewithal. I'm going to send my kid to Siena.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Exactly. So we're lowering the bar. We want to make it simpler.
Yeah.
We want to make people have a sense of guarantee. You can't guarantee everything, but you can at least make the language cleaned up. And
Yeah.
so,
You want
so
me
these,
to change this bullet then to change the 0.5 mile
Guarantee.
back to catchment area
yes,
and eliminate 60%?
yes. And I'm sorry, I do have to go, but please continue. Like
I have to
just
go back to
through.
open
'Cause I
house at
have-
least time myself.
Okay, because I have to go to 12 school.
Okay.
Oh.
Now, will we get, I think we need to make sure that we send out links to all the various things that are or should be posted on something, because
Take care.
If I had to go and find this somewhere, I don't know that I could.
I'll make
even if
sure,
it was
when you mail it
someplace.
to me, I thought I had put it, I'm sorry, I thought I had put it in. I'll make sure it gets,
Who is going to be the new Mia for this group?
I think Deborah Flanagan
Okay.
for the time being.
Is she going to be attending meetings?
Not necessarily, because we're kind of doing our own thing with Google
Mhm.
Doc once the document is in here.
Okay,
So,
'cause
but I can make sure that she's doing the communication between.
Yeah, it's hard to say how many people still keep track of mailings that Mia sent out or that I sent out.
Yeah.
I think there's a big problem for some people in accessing the board docs or whatever in Google Drive. It's,
I'll update, the things we discussed
Yeah.
and send it back to you,
Okay.
Liz, and then maybe you can just email it out
Mhm.
to the group.
Yeah. One thing here, and I do need to go, compile and analyze results from the community forums that we just
Mhm.
did, because we'll be presenting this already at the community forum, so we don't need to say community forums. Just collapse bullet 1 and 2. Yeah. So. Yeah. That might be repetitive, that page. And I'm not sure I'd make a slide for that one, but we could speak that one. That could be part of our script,
Mhm.
all those points, like when we're discussing it. Everything else. And if there's more stuff, like specifics, like we're trying to get back to the catchment areas, we need to decide among our group if we're recommending another zone-wide for the north, or if we're just going to keep the city-wides in the 2. That's still up for.
Well, I think John's
Discussion.
point about finding out about statistics on that would be very helpful.
So, okay, and I wrote
Again,
that question down for Kathy.
Yeah,
So I have
there's a
some
waiting
homework.
list.
Right,
Yeah.
if nobody's clamoring for that from the north,
Okay.
then
All right.
why do it?
Then I will have a meeting with Kathy with all these questions I wrote down from today. We'll update this. And next week,